In a small New Jersey town, a 600-year-old tree is dying. I've been living in Tanzania for the last 16 years, but I grew up near this tree and passed it every Saturday morning on the way to my horseback riding lessons. This tree meant something to me that I may not have realized until recently, because when I learned that this magnificent white oak was dying, I felt a pang in my heart. There was a connection there. And it turns out I was not on my own. An entire community is grieving to commemorate this old warrior who's lived over 220,000 days and who shelters the graves of many shorter-lived souls than itself. There'll be a year-long celebration to commemorate the tree, to honor it, and the community's connection to it, a connection to nature. And this gives me hope, because I'm worried about the world today. Our world is increasingly unbalanced, and an unbalanced world creates havoc. We see that now in our daily lives. With global extremist attacks on the rise, we increasingly poignantly understand that a world out of balance can be an extremely scary place to be. Balance is never black and white. To me, it's a moving equilibrium that requires compensation. In our search for balance, we have to look out to a wider spectrum that includes a diversity of viewpoints, needs, and challenges. Balance is inclusive, not exclusive or divisive. Balance seeks harmony. In nature, we see some of the greatest examples of balance. Nature promotes resilience in an intricate, constantly moving, shifting balance, even in the most primal moments. I was present in this violent scene, but there was a beautiful quiet, a sense of peace in the mare's forward-looking ears as the dance of predator and prey, of life and death took over. She never called out because of nature's mercy, adrenalines and endorphins running through her body, numbing the pain. In the diversity of life that we see in our forests, in our oceans, in the deserts, the savannas, the icescapes, in the relationships within those places, they maintain our watersheds. They protect us against storms. They provide us a bountiful amount of food, but not inexhaustible. And they help regulate the climate. But we're losing this diversity, this possibility of balance on a daily basis. In Tanzania, the wild area where I live is called Nomoni in the Maasai language. It means place of rhino. And in this part of northern Tanzania, there used to be an incredible number of them. They're all long gone today. In Robert Macfarlane's book, Landmarks, he points out that the Oxford Junior Dictionary for 7-year-olds has recognized this loss of connection in our lives. And so it's replacing nature-related terms like acorn, otter, and willow with network-related terms like blog, MP3 player, and voicemail. Is this the direction that we want to go? Because there's good news, too. There's important news. In a publication in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, we found that just by taking a walk in the woods, you can improve your mental health. You can quiet actually specific vital areas of your brain, improving your peace of mind, finding that balance. And this reinforces something that I personally knew for me ever since I was a little girl, that I needed nature and the balance that it provides. And so I'm passionate about finding the balance in that magical harmony and taking inspiration from the natural world around us. In Africa, the large mammals are in free fall. African lions have declined by 80% over the last 20 years, going from 100,000 animals 100 years ago to just maybe 35,000 today, possibly as low as 20,000. The Great Elephant Census shows us that 30% of the elephant population has been lost in the last 7 years, going from 1.2 million animals 20 years ago to just 350,000 animals remaining today. And every time we lose a lion or an elephant, we lose their connection to the environment as well. The dispersal of seeds in the elephant's dung, the opening of habitat as the elephants feed and knock down trees, the movements of zebra, wildebeest, and buffalo in response to the lion's presence, the aeration of soils as the great herds trample the ground. What happens when these are all gone? I became a wildlife conservationist because I wanted to save lions, but I quickly discovered this work was going to be incredibly more complicated than I had originally thought, and I needed to stop thinking so much about lions and think more about the people who live among them, the people who were killing them with guns, poisons, and spears because the lions were attacking their cattle, goats, and sheep. And so I needed, as a conservationist, to move beyond asking how many lions there were and what they needed, and rather turn the question around and ask, what do the people need, and why would they want to save the lions or the habitats where they roam? Can we find the balance? Can we find the balance in conserving wildlife and the environment with the growth and prosperity of rural communities living amongst them? It is possible. But it requires us to move beyond a singular perspective with lions on the one side and people on the other. In my work, I seek to find the balance between people and wildlife, lions and livestock, men and women, and much more. My husband and I have been working in Tanzania for the last 16 years, living among the Maasai people and the lions. In the early years, we shared our frustrations as conditions worsened for people and wildlife, as we saw lions being killed for reasons that were preventable, as we watched women who were dependent on a healthy environment, seeing the resources around them being destroyed. But at the early years, we were looking from a singular perspective, our view of wanting to save the lion. But that pivotal moment, when we turned the question around and we asked, why would people want to conserve the environments? That's when things changed. That's when things changed. And it started a long conversation that has continued to evolve today. It was the notion of balance. We discovered that people were desperately concerned about their future and their cattle culture. To the Maasai people, the cattle is wealth, it's pride, it's social identity. With every acre transformed for planted crops, you lose an acre for your livestock. And so they were in a quest for balance between cultivation by individuals and other people and the secured protection of grasslands as a community for their livestock. And so it was no longer lions on the one side and people on the other. We suddenly realized saving lions could mean helping people protect their pastures, helping them maintain watersheds so future communities could have access to clean water. It could mean securing a community's livelihood. When we give people room to breathe, when we put out the fires of conflict, then people can consider lions in a different way, the possibility of benefiting from living among them rather than competing with them. We just had to broaden our lens. And so our incredible Tanzanian team has now had thousands of conversations with rural community members, discovering their own motivations for protecting the environment. And that's what's key, their own motivations for protecting the environment. And they're finding the balance in incredible ways, transforming lives, developing win-win solutions that are based on different viewpoints and understanding the nuances on the ground. Our living walls are a perfect example. Retaliatory killing against lions is one of the primary causes of their decline across the continent. But with Maasai intuition, with Maasai knowledge, we developed these environmentally friendly predator-proof corrals that are protecting livestock from lions and keeping lions out of the way of Maasai spears. We have hundreds of them across northern Tanzania now, impacting tens of thousands of people on a daily basis and protecting approximately 150 lions from guns, poisons, and spears, finding the balance. We've planted over 150,000 trees as fence posts and counting, and what this is doing is bringing life back to the bush, combating climate change, finding the balance. Nondo Monkuku is a widow living below Mount Kilimanjaro. She had to send her cattle away because she could no longer take care of them after her husband passed away. She installed a living wall and was able to bring her livestock back and return to her daily routine of milking them in the morning. Nondamun is finding the balance. Our women's beekeeping initiative is another excellent example of finding the balance between people and wildlife. 70% of Tanzania's 55 million people depend on healthy resources for clean water, firewood, healthy soils for their crops, healthy pastures for their livestock. And the women, as in many African communities, are often responsible for the day-to-day tasks. So they need to find the balance between their daily activities and their own personal development. With our beekeeping initiative, we've engaged 1,000 women. We give microgrants to women's groups so that they can purchase modern hives, and in return, they do conservation projects in their community, finding the balance. The bees in the hives produce valuable honey and wax that the women can then sell to improve their livelihoods. And the nesting of beehives in bee reserves protects valuable land for livestock and wildlife grazing, finding the balance. Mama Helena Mbarnoti, she's one of the chairwomen of the women's associations that we work with. She noticed that as the beekeeping businesses expanded, men started taking notice. And she said, now we're seen as having a purpose beyond our traditional household roles. They're finding the balance. Well, December 7th, 2012, I became a mother, and I learned in myself that there was something as important to me as conservation and nature. My beautiful daughter, Kima, the light of my life. And I suddenly had two passions, conservation and Kima, in just 24 hours in a day. Extremely frustrating. So I needed to find the balance in my own life. This was not easy, and it took a long time, but it's been incredibly refreshing. I'm more inspired, I work better, and I'm immeasurably happier in my own life now that I've found this balance. And because of Kima, I want to do more. And I now understand intimately that we save these places and these wild animals not only for ourselves, but also, more so, for the balance of the next generation. This magical diversity of life inspires us. The diversity of the world helps protect us, and it engages with us, like this honey guide, which comes to us and leads us to wild hives, asking us to open up the hive so it can have a taste of the honey. Back in Tanzania, I think about the venerable fig trees that line the stream banks of my community of today, and I worry about their future. As Africa buckles under the increasing pressures of water scarcity, will these fig trees survive? Will they live out their lives like that magnificent white oak that still touches my soul today? Fortunately, just as in that New Jersey community, I'm not alone in contemplating this. Our youth wildlife club members and environmental scholars are pushing their neighbors and families to protect these trees, the cornerstone of their community. A young generation of Tanzanians is joining me, and I hope you will too, because if we all consider the balance in our lives and communities, just taking small adjustments step by step, considering a broader lens where we bring people and nature together, then we can have an incredible impact on the world today. And you won't be alone. We'll be there in Tanzania, a community of 55 million people, pushing beyond thousands of living walls, millions of trees planted, tens of thousands of women improving their livelihoods, and millions of children learning and growing, ever edging closer to a world in balance. Thank you.